everyone, and welcome to another Virtual Student Experiences Season 2 webinar. Today's webinar will focus on social justice. If you guys are new to our program, Virtual Student Experiences is a pro bono initiative spearheaded for students by students. And we at Virtual Student Experiences want to be the inspiration for aspiration. Our goal is to give students around the world an opportunity to hear from professionals in their career industry of interest in a friendly and casual setting. And if you're a student that knows what you want to do in the future, we at VSC want to encourage, allow, and connect with professionals. And through VSC, students are given the chance to decide if their career choice fits their personality, skills, and really overall interests. And through VSC, you'll be able to hear from a wide variety of guests from a wide variety of seniority levels. To find out more information and to be notified about other webinars, you can visit our website at www.virtualstudentexperiences.com. But before we get started, I just want to let you all know how this is going to work. Firstly, I'm going to be asking our guest professional that I'll introduce in a second a series of basic knowledge questions so that you can get a good idea of who she is and what she does. I'm real quickly just introducing our core team of volunteers. We have Becket, Gabby, Jonathan, Coco, Tommy, and Audrey. And without further ado, our very special guest for today is Mariya Taher. Ms. Taher is an expert in gender-based violence and has been for the past decade been teaching, researching, developing programs, and directly servicing that issue. Ms. Taher received her MFA in creative writing at Lesley University, receiving the Graduate School of Arts and School Sciences Dean's Merit Scholarship, and the Lesley University Graduate Student Leadership Award. She then went on to receive a Master's in Social Work from San Francisco State University and a BA from the UC Santa Barbara in Religious Studies. Ms. Taher has since held and continues to hold positions as the co-founder and U.S. Executive Director of SEO, Narrative Liaison at Topo's Partnership, Advisory Board Member at NFGM/C U.S. Network, Contract Facilitator at Story Center, and Board of Directors member at Cambridge Common Writers. Because of her dedication towards the issue, Ms. Taher has become very successful at benefiting the issue of FGC that she so strongly advocates for. So we are very happy to have you today, Ms. Taher. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to speak.
Awesome. So just to start us off, can you tell us what social justice is and how you got into that field?
Sure. So social justice is definitely a very broad term. You know, it is, I think it's the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights, or more along, it's the field of equity. So I think social justice composes a lot of different issue areas. In particular, I work in a lot of areas around gender-based violence and really looking at how gender norms contribute to continuing violence and the idea that everyone has the right or human right to freedom of violence. But in general, social justice, again, is a very broad term, but it is something that I think overall you could say that it is working towards equity for all of humanity in various ways.
And then can you tell us where your passion for this social justice began?
Yeah, you know, it's not something that I knew off the bat that this was my passion area, but I think it really began with my family history. So I grew up in a family that was very, very giving, and I grew up with this story actually of my grandfather, who I never met, and he was a judge from India, and unfortunately he was poisoned when my dad was 15 years old. And after his death, the family learned that he had been giving alms. So he was helping, you know, poor families to make sure they have food on the table. He was helping students would-be students go to school to become doctors and lawyers. But our family had no idea that he was doing this. It was only after his death that various people were coming up to the family and kind of asking like what happened to the money, and also just, you know, giving condolences. And that's when our family learned about his charitable givings. And I grew up with that story, and I think it really shaped my idea of giving. And my father is also very much a community supporter in terms of just giving to a lot of different fields. And that was something that, as I grew up, I knew about that, and I think it shaped subconsciously my desire to be something in the humanitarian profession. And I wasn't quite sure exactly what it was. And then later on, it wasn't actually until after college that, and I went to UC Santa Barbara, as you mentioned. So after college, that I started recognizing that I had an interest in nonprofit work, and then slowly found an internship, which I'm happy to talk about later on, but it was at the American Red Cross, and that internship made me understand I really wanted to go into social work, and then I ended up going for my master's in social work, and then that's when I learned about, that I had an interest in gender-based violence, and just sort of had a ripple effect afterwards. And I'm happy to go into that, but that's just kind of briefly what led me to this path.
Awesome. That's a really inspiring story. And I guess in your journey, do you think that there's any really prerequisites in order to enter into the field of social work?
I don't think so. I do think you have to have a passion for this area. It is very easy to get burnt out, and many people do get burnt out. And when I talk about social work is very broad as well. And I think when people first think about social work, they think about direct services, meaning clinical services. So like, being you could go into the field of counseling therapy. There are folks who have MSWs, the Master of Social Work, that do clinical practice in that way. Then there are also other folks that do direct services known as like case management. So they might work at child protective services offices, things like that too. But I did a social work degree in administration and planning, and that was because I was very interested more on the macro level. How do organizations work? How do nonprofits work? How does policy work in terms of, advancing social justice issues? And that was, and I consider myself a social worker, but I think that that's just something that is definitely, it's definitely good to understand that it's a very broad field. And I do think that people that enter the field, they have some sort of passion, and it generally comes from, unfortunately, some sort of experience, that might have happened in their personal lives, either to them or to people they know. And in gender-based violence work, and I've worked from domestic violence to sexual assault organizations to my current nonprofit, SEO, and we work on the issue of female genital cutting or mutilation. And all across all of those organizations, many people who enter it do have that personal reference, and they have this passion to want to change things, to want to change culture and society in that way. So I do feel like that's an important prerequisite. Other than that, I think getting experiences any way you can in terms of, connecting with organizations and individuals that are doing this, that's always great, and trying things out. But I think in general, there isn't any significant prerequisite. If you want to go further, like I did, you can go and get a master's of social work if you would like to, but there are other ways to be a social justice advocate.
Awesome. And then is there a specific mindset that you have to have? And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do feel like going back to my last question and just talking about burnout, I have to admit that I have been burnt out before. And one of the lessons that I've learned is really being able to take care of yourself and practice self-care. So that's a word that we use a lot in the social justice field, is self-care. And we recognize that that's important because social justice issues oftentimes have a huge emotional, mental impact on you, not just from, the folks at your communities you're working with, but maybe your own personal issues. And so knowing how to step back and take care of yourself, whether that means hanging out with a friend or reading a book, is very important. So I think that finding that mindset, recognizing that balance between your passion and your work, and then also how do you take care of yourself so that you can continue that work, is really important. And then two other things I think are just persistence and being opened or having an open mind, because I do feel like with the mindset of persistence, there'll be setbacks, there'll be challenging, frustrating days. That goes back to the idea of self-care. But if it is something you're interested in, then I think you have to be persistent. You have to be able to figure out, what do you need to continue in this work? And it could just be that, if you're doing direct services and working with a client, maybe you have a frustrating experience with that client, and then you need to talk to a team member or somebody like that. But I do think there are certain mindsets that, like persistence, knowing yourself, taking care of yourself, those types of things are just really important.
And then I guess looking towards your education in terms of your college, can you speak about maybe some of the most important lessons that you took away from them, and maybe some of the most important lessons that still help you today?
Yeah, so when I was at UC Santa Barbara, I was very shy. I was shy growing up too. And it did take me a little while before I got more involved in campus life and in school activities. And one of my first positions was, it was actually a first school job, other than tutoring or babysitting, was being an academic peer advisor at my specific College of Letters and Science within UC Santa Barbara. And that gave me this opportunity to build leadership skills and to be able to work with other students and really thinking about how do they meet their academic needs. And that also just kind of opened up my own mind in terms of recognizing that you can study various majors and things like that at college. And school, I think it's not just about the classes that you're taking, which are important, obviously, but it's also about the social emotional benefits you gain from experiences. And that means connecting with other students, those work experiences that you might have, those activities, school clubs, activities that you might have too, the networks you make. So if you have internships or making connections with people, your cohort too, all of those things really were important. And I don't think I really quite understood that until I got involved with that first job at college. And that opened up the door to me being involved in other activities on campus too, such as I was part of the orientation staff that helped incoming students come into school, incoming freshmen come into college, and how do they register for classes, what is campus life like, and things like that, and other opportunities as well. But I think about that because that really did shape my path in terms of the other activities that I did in college, which eventually led to my first real adult job after college. And that kind of led to then me doing this internship also at American Red Cross, and then to social work. But I feel like it shaped a lot of what I did. And it's interesting because I didn't know that at the time. It's only in looking back now that I recognize all of that.
And then of the four languages that you speak, can you tell us which of them do you find to be the most important or the most useful?
Yeah. So I grew up I was born in the US, but my parents are from India, and they are from a Muslim community which speaks a language called Dawnese Zaban. It's a very small language, but they also speak something called Gujarati, and I grew up learning that language. And then my dad's side of the family speaks a language called Urdu. I can actually understand them quite well. I don't speak them as well, but that's also something that I think it helps me understand different cultures and communities. I think learning languages in general helps you speak different language, understand different communities, and it gives you a broader global perspective about the world we're living in. But one thing that I found interesting about the languages, I also grew up learning how to read and write Arabic, but I actually can't speak Arabic. But one thing that I learned when I was in college, one of my minors, so I was a religious studies major, but then I had two minors, and one of them was sociocultural linguistics. And I remember sitting in a class and they were talking about language patterns from first generation to second generation, particularly when you move to other countries where the language of your ancestry might not be the dominant language anymore. And I had always kind of struggled with the fact that I couldn't speak it as fluently as I could, but I could understand everything. And in that class, I recognized that it was the first time where they said, this is actually very common. And this is something that happens. And it sort of helped me shape my identity in a way, in terms of recognizing that I've kind of gone away from the purpose of your question, but or your original question, but it helped me recognize that I don't know I grew up in this very multicultural global experience that I'm so happy about, even if I can't speak it fluently. And that being able to recognize and be comfortable with other cultures and communities is just something that I need in my own professional life now too, because I work with so many communities and cultures from all across the globe too.
That's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then I guess for students and people that are monolingual, would you suggest them learning languages? And if so, maybe which languages?
Yeah, no, I definitely encourage learning languages. I think that there's so many languages out there. It's hard to like recommend a certain language, but I do think that you know, I in high school I learned Spanish, but I feel like I'm from California originally, and so Spanish felt like very important to learn there, and I do feel like that's a really great, useful skill. But I also think it's great to learn languages that you have an interest in. I have friends that had random interest in Russian, but they weren't really going to Russia, but they were hoping so in the future, and they wanted to learn that. But I went to Senegal, which is a French-speaking country, and that was the first time I recognized that, or I realized that French is another language that is just very much a global language that would be important to learn. But again, I think in general, learning languages is great in terms of opening up your mind to other cultures.
Awesome. And then I guess focusing a little bit on your experiences, can you tell us about your role as the U.S. Executive Director of SEO and your responsibilities and the skills that you use there?
Sure. So at SEO, manage financial and programmatic oversight of the entire organization. So that means that I look to make sure that our programs are functioning well, that and our staff are carrying out the responsibilities that they're supposed to be carrying out. If there are challenges that come up, that we talk through those challenges. I also look at the financial oversight and health of our organization. So we're constantly we're doing a lot of things with budgeting and numbers, but also we do a lot of future planning, because to sustain our organization, we do rely on donations and funding. So building a lot of partnerships with funders, or looking at other ways to extend our programs by partnering with other organizations or whatnot. But it is a lot of I never actually thought I would be an executive director. I very much like program planning more. So I in terms of being able to develop programs, and thinking about from the macro level, who do you want to serve? Who do you want this to help? But with the executive director role, you have to kind of be cognizant of the organization's entire health, and really just that is an added pressure that I'm continually learning how to do as well.
Awesome. And then for your experiences and role at NFGM/C, can you touch on that and your responsibilities and role there?
Yeah, so it's the USFGMC Network, and it is a coalition-based organization. So that means that it is its mission is to really raise awareness of FGMC across the U.S. and internationally. But also, when I say FGMC, I mean female genital mutilation / cutting, which is what female genital cutting, which I referred to earlier, is also known as. And really, it helps to make connections and collaborations with organizations and individuals across the US who are working on this issue. So we have, I think, about 60 member organizations at this time across the US, and they vary from various fields, from the health sector to government to community support organizations, or what we call civil society, to survivors as well, who are included in there, and law enforcement also. So variety of societies. And I sit on the steering committee and just help shape the strategic direction of the organization. So that means like thinking about high level, how is this organization going to help foster those connections and collaboration, and really advance this mission that we have to support survivors, but also to put an end to the harmful social practice, social norm practice that is female genital cutting or mutilation. And so yeah, that's kind of basically what I do, is really provide that high level strategic overview for the entire organization.
And then just looking big picture, can you tell us about the top 3 skills that you use every single day?
Yeah, I think communication for sure. That's just, you have to be a good communicator, both orally, written, and I think that communication falls in line with another skill, with just collaborating, which to do this work, you can't just work in a vacuum. You have to build partnerships with others, and you need to be able to communicate well to be able to build those partnerships, as well as to be able to work with teams. And there are written skills come in handy, from everything from writing the hundreds of emails that you write weekly to things like today I was working on a funding proposal. So writing that funding proposal, to sending out newsletters to all of your supporters about the work that you're doing. So it's a variety of important written skills that you need. And then being able to build relationships with other organizations and individuals and the communities you want to serve. That's just so important. And then I think the third one would be thinking about conflict resolution, or how do you handle conflict resolution, because you will have challenges. And since you are working with a team of varying people have different personalities, and they have different work ethics, and you have to really figure out how can you overcome any challenges that might present itself in a variety of ways, and making sure that you practice direct communication, meaning we're not just avoiding those issues, that we're actually talking about them, and figuring out how can we resolve any potential issue, whether it's interpersonal relationships between team members, or something with our program or with our partners, or anything like that. Just having good conflict resolution skills is so important.
And then obviously the pandemic has really changed all of our daily lives by quite a bit, but can you tell us about how your life has changed and what it looked like, what your job and day-to-day looked like before the pandemic, and what it looks like now?
Yeah. I always say that, so I worked remotely before the pandemic too, but I always say there's a difference between pre-pandemic remote working and remote working now. Pre-pandemic remote working, I would have days where I am on video calls, I am working at my computer, I am constantly on calls with people, or on WhatsApp or texting with people from various different time zones as well. So just having to figure out how to balance all of that. And that hasn't changed. That's still happening. What has changed is that prior to the pandemic, my time was also balanced with a lot of in-person events and conferences. And so I traveled a lot for my work, both domestically, throughout the US, and also internationally. And unfortunately, that has changed. So I have not been doing any traveling, but no one in my sector, not just within FGC, I think in social services and humanitarian services, it's very rare to be traveling right now. Every meeting, every conference, all of SEO's programming that we're doing, everything is virtual now. So it's unfortunate. I'm glad that we're able to continue programming in that way, and we're able to build partnerships and go to conferences in that way still, but it is, there always is something different about in person and building that relationship versus being able to do it virtually. So that's just something that has changed drastically, and we're still getting used to, but we are trying to find ways to just keep that human connection alive. It's so important. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when we can go back and work together in person and have in-person events again too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, everything moved to online, and I know especially for me living in Hawaii, our tourism numbers went down by a lot.
I bet.
But I guess just for you, can you offer some suggestions or words of inspiration for aspiring social justice advocates?
Yeah, I think that if there's an issue you're passionate about, learn more about it. You can do a simple first step by just doing a Google search. I actually did that when I was starting to learn more about female genital cutting. Was I wanted, I think it was in high school. I started Googling it and wanting to learn more. And then I think if you're interested in a particular area, or you want to learn more about how do you find solutions or make a social change in that area, whatever your social justice issue is, whether it's something like gender violence related to mental health, to substance abuse, anything, economic inequality, then figure out if there are organizations or individuals, that you can connect with and you can reach out to, either just maybe to talk to them about their professional experiences, which I think that's a great reason that this program exists, or maybe see if there's volunteer opportunities or an internship or something that you can do just to get a taste of what that field is like and what it would be like to work in it. But I definitely think keep learning, keep trying to get experiences, and don't get, when you get frustrated, just make sure that you figure out what you can do to take care of yourself, but keep going at it, because everybody has setbacks and failures, but it's important to keep moving forward. And I think that's how you'll get to where you want to be.
Most definitely. I mean, thank you so much for offering that. Just to close us off, can you tell us or give us some advice on what courses or clubs students should partake in, and what the typical path that a successful social justice advocate such as yourself takes?
Wonderful question. I think it goes back to find your passion area. And then what I said, when I was in college, I got a late start in getting involved in campus activities, but I did find once I did, it really helped me blossom in terms of developing leadership skills, developing friendships too, thinking about what are next opportunities that I can do. So I think that in whatever age you're in, school, if there are activities at your school, there are clubs at your school that you're interested in, get involved, try them out. You're not going to know what you like or what you don't like until you do that. If there are activities not at your school, but there are other activities, like I said, like organizations or groups that you want to get involved in, reach out to them, and don't be scared to do it. It can be intimidating sometimes, but it doesn't hurt to email someone, to call somebody, to just ask about that too. I do think that's just really important. I do think that experiences in general are important. Even sometimes, doing the things that make you scared, those are some of the most important experiences too. I told you I was shy and terrified of public speaking, and I made myself do public speaking until I don't love it. I mean, still I can sometimes get nervous, but I'm a lot more comfortable with it than I was growing up. And I think, yeah, just don't stop trying new experiences.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate the time that you've been able to share with us here today, along with the really inspiring and insightful stories that you were able to share with us. And I'm sure that the students that were able to join us today and the students that will really view this later will be able to greatly benefit from what you were able to share with us today. So I thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to have been able to speak with you.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.